Welcome everybody to the ShopNotes Podcast. This is episode number 62, if you can believe it. I am Logan Whitmer. Phil and John are out on spring break this week, so we're joined by two new faces to the podcast that I wanted to introduce you guys to. So before we get started, let's take a second to thank today's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Shaper Tools, the makers of the Shaper Origin. It's the handheld CNC router that brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. Take advantage of Shaper's spring deal where you can save $150 in added accessories by March 28th. Visit shapertools.com to learn more about how you can upgrade your workshop with the Shaper Origin. All right, so like I said, John and Phil are out this week on spring break. So we have two new faces or two new voices for people not watching on YouTube. I say new, but you guys have been here forever, right?
Pretty much.
Is that a girl? We have a girl on staff? That's crazy. So I figured we would have a couple new people join us and kind of get your guys' story, because I think everybody that works with us, and I think you guys would agree with me, everybody that works at Woodsmith kind of has an interesting and unique background. I don't think there's two people on staff that really have the exact same interests and the exact same, hobbies and aspects of woodworking, right? So I thought this would be interesting. So I guess we will start with age before beauty. So I think we'll start with Erich. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Erich, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like how did you get to Woodsmith? You've been here for, I mean, obviously I know your story. So you've been here for a while, but share with everybody, years. How long you've been here, what you do, what you do at home.
Cool.
Kind of your life story.
Sure, there you go. Well, I started at Woodsmith in 1995, January 3rd of 95. Before that, I had worked for 17 years in the construction industry, residential construction. Started as a concrete finisher, ended up as a trim carpenter, home building foreman, assistant foreman, service call guy, that kind of stuff. Spent a lot of years doing that. And all the time, in the background, I was drawing. I was drawing pictures. I drew pictures for people of their houses. I drew pictures of people of their pets. I drew pictures of whatever anybody would want. And so that was the art side of everything that kind of kept things alive and kicking. And then there was an opening just in the newspaper here in central Iowa for an illustrator, and I applied. And there was this woolly guy named Ted who took a chance on me. So his name is Ted Kralicek. And he took a chance on me, and so I started for Woodsmith. I initially worked for Woodsmith and ShopNotes as a kind of a cleanup illustrator. I worked on both magazines. And about a year after I started, Woodsmith acquired Workbench, which was the longest running home improvement magazine. So I went over there as an illustrator, and then at some of the time as an associate editor as well.
Awesome. So Erich, forgive me for my ignorance.
That's right.
But 1995, I don't remember much from when I was 7 years old.
There you go.
Were you guys doing illustrations back at that time by hand, or were you doing them on the computer?
A combination. Everything was still inked. We had a little photo room in the back room behind the receptionist area where we'd shoot stuff on Polaroid, and then we would trace it and kind of build up the mock-ups of the pages, and then we'd ink on vellum, and then that ink would get scanned, and then the scan would then we'd go to the digital. It was really basic digital at that time.
Sure.
But then we would go to the digital side of stuff and add what color very limited palette, kind of similar to, we still have a pretty limited palette.
Sure, yeah.
But what we call call-outs, the little sets of words to point to, this is the tenon, this is the mortise, those call-outs, we'd do all that stuff inside of a program called Corel. Corel version 3 is a program that we started with, and
And that's what I had at home, so that's what I grew up on, playing
That's
with.
right. It was actually a very good program. It lived in the shadow of Illustrator, but it was every bit as good and better in some areas. So, and then a lot of that transferred over to Workbench as well. Now, Workbench is a different beast because you're drawing rooms and room additions and things bigger than bread baskets, which is kind of, obviously we have some big furniture in Woodsmith and some big projects in ShopNotes as well, but it expanded over there. And then that's when I started using 3D software. We started with a program called True Space that we would set up our scenes and maneuver the scenes, bring in the parts that we wanted to on a table saw, and then we would print that out, and then we would ink on vellum.
Gotcha.
Like before. That was the initial leap. And then we went to this program that we're still using today called 3D Studio Max. And it's all digital now. The ink pens are, well, I've got a bunch of them in a drawer down here in my shop.
They're probably all dried up, aren't they?
Well, the ones that I didn't clean, I can just might as well use them as filler somewhere or something,
So I have a question about Workbench. What was the staff? What was the number of staff at that time?
Our first staff?
Yeah.
The staff that we built, because originally what we were going to do was a magazine called Home Right. A guy named Chris Inman came on board, and he was going to develop this magazine that was going to be very similar to Woodsmith in that no advertising, nothing but furniture. Well, it ended up being the same kind of moniker, or the tagline was woodworking to improve your home, was what Workbench's tagline ended up being. And Home Right was kind of the same deal. We were kind of partway done with the first issue or so, and Don Peschke, the owner of the company, the founder, purchased Workbench Magazine for a pretty inexpensive amount, and we kind of morphed into that. The first issue that we did was some pickup stuff, basically, because it came to us pretty quickly. Pickup stuff that came to us from the existing magazine stuff. So it was a kind of a trial by fire, from both the art and the editorial side, because this whole system can be really proprietary and people do things a certain way. Well, it was all kind of shooting from the hip for the first year or so there. And then the staff was Chris Inman, Robert Foss, Kent Welch was our designer, builder, because he like me had a home improvement background.
Gotcha.
Minette Bigler, who is now Minette Johnson, another illustrator named Susan Jessen, and me, and then there was a parade. it was a parade of people after that, for the time that we did what we did.
So the Workbench title, as you kind of alluded to, is what you worked a lot on in the past, and August Home Publishing, prior to us being active in Interest Media, purchased Workbench. Workbench, I'm looking at the archive right now, so people can still buy. They can still get Workbench Magazine if they want. Yep. They can buy the USB. We might have an online archive of it as well. So you could buy the back issues.
Some of them are plans, I think, aren't they, Becky?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Some of them came over as plans,
Yep. But the first issue of Workbench Magazine, irregardless of where it was or who owned it at the time, was February 1957.
Yeah, it's a month older than me.
That? Wow. That's awesome.
It's 1 month older than me.
And it ran clear up until, 2009, I think?
Correct. And it kind of faded away into a different product for a brief amount of time here, and it was just, again, it was the powers that be that kind of shelved it. When we bought it, the guy that owned it in Kansas City had basically been milking it for quite a bit of time. He wanted it to be the lowest priced magazine listed in Publishers Clearinghouse, so that the people that believed that you had to buy something to qualify would buy that.
Oh,
that was his goal for Workbench Magazine. So you could see that it had suffered some disrespect, as it were.
Sure. Well,
but it was fun to do, and it was a lot of fun projects. And that USB, like you say, there's a lot of good stuff. There's some real dated stuff. We have some TV cabinets for TVs that.
Yeah, I was flipping through the archive the other day, and I saw a plan for a wall rack CD storage. Just like, oh god, flashback. The '90s called. Right. They want their CDs back.
Exactly.
They want to put them back in their car visor.
Your iPod holder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's funny.
Yeah.
I feel like we should mention we're recording this. So obviously these get released on Fridays. We're recording this on St. Patrick's Day. So in the spirit, I had to have a Irish Red. Killian's.
Excellent.
Yep. It's
I've got a car bomb waiting upstairs for assembly that I'll do. I didn't want to do on my maiden voyage on the podcast.
All right, so Erich, that's a little bit of your background, at least at Woodsmith and Workbench.
Well, and then I came back to Woodsmith when Workbench kind of faded away. We did a thing called My Home, My Style, and then as that kind of started to fade away, I started batting some cleanup with the art director over at Woodsmith, Todd Lamberth, who actually has been at this company, I think, 6 months shy of amount that I have. I left for a period of time, so he's technically been here longer, but he started about 6 months after I did.
Gotcha.
And so
now,
and then so when I came back,
I guess now you're kind of a jack of all trades, though.
Yeah, that's one word for it.
Jack of something.
People call me that and all sorts of other names that you probably shouldn't say on a family show.
So it used to be that in Woodsmith and in Workbench and ShopNotes and all the titles, there was a very distinct division of labor, I guess, right? You had editors, you had illustrators, you had designers, and you had builders. And that was back when we had a large staff.
You're correct.
We don't have that big a staff anymore. So we all wear multiple hats now. And Erich, yours kind of is an interesting one because you...
Actually looks better with it on.
You have obviously the art background, but you also have the editorial background. So in our current issues of Woodsmith, not only are you writing, multiple pages and multiple projects and departments, but you're also illustrating one of the projects each issue. So you're actually doing the artwork on it as well.
Yeah, it's fun.
So,
I like doing that. I like the diversity of it. When we were talking about the earlier way that we did stuff where we would spend time doing board drawings and then we'd ink and then we would then we do a computer. That kind of diversity is a lot of fun. Now the software we use is just cool as can be. I really enjoy it, but it's kind of boring. You work with the same thing all the time, and the challenge of like when we used to actually do these construction views drawn on a table, figuring out where you're going to place that board or have to move that was actually a lot of fun. And so getting to both write and illustrate now brings back some of that diversity. And it's given me, historically I'm an illustrator, but it has given me a very insightful sensitivity to what editors wrestle with. It really does. Because there are things that I look back and I thought, oh boy, I was being a jerk.
So who's more sensitive, the art department or the editorial department?
Oh, that's a case-by-case basis, really. It depends. It's pretty nice now. We don't have too many sensitive people on our staff anymore, because like you said, all of us have to do. Becky, you? No.
Yeah, a little bit.
Maybe. Well, yeah, I don't get to work with you day to day with those knuckleheads that you work with, too. So.
Yeah. Logan.
Yeah, it's just, like you said, it's multiple hats now, and that transition got ramped up when the new company came on board, and I'm okay with it personally.
Yeah.
Like I say, I enjoy it, but I know that, a lean ship means, there can be nervous times now and then, trying to make sure stuff gets done.
Yeah. So speaking of sensitive people, let's go over to our legacy. She's when we refer to her as legacy, like she's kind of like that tenured professor you can't get rid of because I
am the Woodsmith baby.
So, yeah, the Woodsmith baby. Yeah, Becky. So, same question for you. You know, what's your background? Because you have a kind of interesting one. You have a different take on this entire thing because you grew up with Woodsmith.
Right. So my background actually starts before I was born. My dad, Ted Kralicek, as Erich mentioned, was the first employee under Don Peschke, the founder. So he helped kind of make Woodsmith what it is today. Well, not today. What it became.
What it was.
What it was.
You can see right about issue 10 or so where Ted came on board. There's a clear marking line right there.
Yeah. So he was a part of Woodsmith for about 10 years before I was born, actually. So in 95, that would have made me 5, Erich. And I'm sure we saw each other at company picnics, but I can't. Yeah. I just can't remember from clear back then.
I don't either.
So I started working for Woodsmith. I was an intern in college, just doing what all kids do, who idolize their parents. I followed my dad into his job.
Because your mom was in publishing too, right?
Yeah.
Didn't she work for a newsletter thing for a long time?
A couple different things. She was an editor. She worked for Iowa Outdoors and the DNR, and she actually worked at the Woodsmith store, which is a break-off of the magazine. We're not related anymore, but the Woodsmith store, it was kind of a family. My sister worked there. I worked there in the garden center when I was 14. And then my dad designed that store as well as designing everything else on Woodsmith. So I kind of followed his legacy, not mine. He's the legacy. So started in about 2010, and I am a graphic designer then for the magazine. I do illustrations and kind of have my hands in almost everything Woodsmith at this point. I help,
like most of us.
Yeah,
one way or another.
Speaking of all the hats, we're there's a group of us that are involved in the show, these podcasts, the seminars, you name it. We're behind the scenes if Logan's not in front of the camera.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
So
So not only do you do the illustrations from the magazine standpoint, you also control a lot of the stuff video-wise. So if anybody watches any video content, you are there behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yep. Boston, you
and she
around.
Puts all them books together too.
Yep,
yeah,
I do.
Most of them.
Special interest books and the plans that are downloadable. I've had my hands on all those too. Yeah. So I'm not a woodworker, but
but you know your stuff through osmosis.
Yes.
Right? Like
I'm a fan of the craft.
Yes, between your dad and having to hang out with us knuckleheads all day, every day, you know?
Yes.
I think you know more than 95% of the population. So when it comes to woodworking.
I do okay in trivia when it comes to woodworking.
It doesn't mean that sometimes you don't call me and be like, hey, I need you to draw what you mean because I don't know what you mean.
Yep.
Especially when it comes to the
Guilty.
late stuff.
Yes.
But yeah. So you have been here for 11 years now, I guess?
Rounding about there.
Or two. Yeah, about 11 years. What were you doing when you were an intern here? Were you doing magazine stuff or were you doing like SIB stuff?
SIB, which is our special interest publications. It's where we take collections of subjects, say bookcases, out of the regular magazines, be it ShopNotes, Woodsmith, or Workbench. So we might collect all those bookcases into a 100-page collection, and then we print those and have them on newsstand. So that's what I was working on, and then plans actually originally was on a different website. And when we moved them into our Woodsmith website, we kind of redesigned them. So I started over with plans. And so every plan that is currently now download or available, I've created. So that's what I did as an intern. Oh, and then I was working on the show as well. And was doing the audio.
I mean, for people that are listening that don't really aren't aware, so we produce our magazine, but then every magazine that we produce has 4 or 5 projects in it, right? And we take those projects after a set amount of time, and we will break them apart into individual plans. So somebody that may not be a Woodsmith Magazine subscriber can still get that plan. They just buy it on woodsmithplans.com as a standalone PDF. So Becky has made all 700 plus of those plans. There's almost 800 now.
No, there's
over
1,000
now. Jeez.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a lot.
So, yeah. She's the glue that holds everything together from the inside. So,
brought to you by...
Because if she didn't do those, we'd have to.
Yeah.
But not only do we all do the magazine stuff, right? So we have, our day-to-day. It's kind of weird, I think, because for the longest time, Woodsmith was always a magazine, and that's what we were, right? That's what we started as. We were a magazine, but then as Woodsmith grew as a brand, we've become so much more than that. And I get it that a lot of people, and as I say Woodsmith, I'm also talking about ShopNotes, especially since we're on the ShopNotes podcast right now. Both Woodsmith, ShopNotes, Workbench, My Home, My Style, all those were individual magazine titles. But through the last 45 years, we've grown to be so much more than just a magazine. And when Phil kind of took over the steering wheel, he said, look, this is the thing. Woodsmith is not only a magazine anymore, and for a long time it hadn't been, but the magazine is one part of what we do. So when we say our day-to-day stuff with the magazine's not necessarily always our entire focus, because we still have video we need to produce, we still have TV show we need to shoot, we still have our website gets a boatload of traffic, and we need to publish articles on those. Erich's done a ton of those articles, so it's kind of been an interesting,
rebuilding department articles the way that Becky has done. The special interest books. It's kind of like the magazine. I think think of it as like it's the fountain, but we're just kind of using it in a larger irrigation system than we have in the past. And I like doing the digital stuff. I have fun doing blog posts and junk like that. It's a diverse day. It adds something different. And once you get the guys on the second floor to help you figure out what goes on with that wonky contentful, then it's okay. And they've been great. Again, they're another part of the team that you never see. Is the guys down there that do the nuts and bolts behind the websites. Yeah.
So
I was going to say, the nice thing about the way that we make this irrigation system is that if you're not a magazine reader, if you're not a print reader, you'd rather listen to it in your car or, watch it on your phone when you have a few minutes rather than sitting down and reading an article, or if you just don't like to store it, it's all digital now. Like, we're able to kind of like teaching to different audiences and how people learn differently. That's what we're doing. Mm-hmm. That's what we're trying to do, is to share this information in every possible way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one thing that has always been interesting to me. And again, I try not to look at this with rose-colored glasses because we work here. But the one thing that's always interested me about Woodsmith and not necessarily even Active Interest Media, but August Home, when it was August Home, is that everybody that works here in some way or another is interested in the content. So, like, you look at everybody that, just for example, Garden Gate is our gardening magazine that inhabits the second floor of our office building. everybody that works at Gardening Gate are avid gardeners. I mean, that's what they do as a hobby. So it's kind of cool because we like to just share the information that we enjoy. And a lot of times the magazine becomes the main outlet for that, or the jumping off point for some of the content. So it's like, hey, let's get this department article done, but then we could take that department article, we could bring it to life in video if people want to see it in video, or we could bring it to life on a web article or whatever. So that's super cool to me.
Yeah. And there was a time, like you said earlier on, when these magazines were really, really distinct, and there was kind of a hierarchy and a bureaucracy, and so to try new things was a pretty big event. Nowadays, it's kind of like, let's give it run it up the pole and see who salutes it, kind of thing. And I kind of enjoyed that element of it more than, because a lot of times in house we'll have a good idea, like, I don't think so. If it's something that we aren't really too warm on, but it's fun to be able to try.
Yeah,
well,
I like that.
What I think is kind of interesting.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Becky. Nope,
I was
go ahead.
I like that we're able to reach more audiences, and I feel like we get a lot more interaction from people too, like, telling us what they like, what they don't like, what they want to learn, and
yeah.
Yeah. When Chris Fitch came on, he brought a lot of that wonderful metalworking stuff. Because I think he started with ShopNotes initially as a designer for ShopNotes, and he brought so much cool. And that was like one of the first really cool examples of, we could do all sorts of stuff here besides this shaker-looking whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is I think it's interesting to see the different people's type of mentality, because now Chris has he's really latched onto the CNC thing, and he's like a young school child with it. Like, he just loves it. He can't get enough of it. So,
it's
and
true.
you know who else can't get enough of it? Shaper. That's right. So, just a reminder that this episode is brought to you by Shaper Tools, the makers of the Shaper Origin. It's the handheld CNC router that brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. You can tackle joinery, cabinetry, hardware installation, and more with speed and precision. Try it risk-free in your shop for 30 days. Visit shapertools.com to learn more.
Well, I was going to say, that product that we talked about there, that CNC type of thing, that shows you how much this industry's changed since when I started on Woodsmith. Basically, I still have my 690 Porter cable routers that I had back then when I first started with the company, and it's like the damn things won't wear out, and so I can't buy any new toys that way. But it's been so fun to watch how technology and a lot of it because of the digital, like the CNC, how that has changed so many things, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
And then that's one of the sweet things about what we get to do is people will let us play with these things and figure them out.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting, and I'm not like, if anybody knows me, and I've met a lot of people, I have had the opportunity to meet a lot of people that listen to our podcast or watch our show and stuff, just through my day-to-day, like buying and selling tools and stuff. And anybody that's met me knows that I'm pretty straightforward. And so I'm not saying this because Shaper is sponsoring this, but like Shaper sent us a Origin to use. Oh God, it's been over a year ago, right?
Yeah, I was thinking it was a couple years, maybe.
Yeah. How time flies, geez.
Yeah.
But how freaking cool was that thing? I don't know if you guys messed around with it at all, Eric. When we had it in, I did an article on it.
I know. It was just kind of. Well, it was one of those things. It was like, who would even think to do this? And then they did it. And then they did it.
Exactly. Well, it's like, so I made this. There's that sign up there. That was a sign I did during the article. And it's just like, I mean, I've had some experience with CNCs, so this wasn't a terrible stretch for me. But yeah, it was freaking amazing. It's like seriously, 20 years ago, people would be like, you're crazy. Like, you're never going to have a handheld. You're never going to have a 690 that controls itself and routes whatever you tell it to route and is Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. I mean,
yes.
so, just the shift over the last, I mean, I wouldn't even say 20 years, the shift over the last 10 years between, like the shaper origin, the saw stop technology, and I think over the next 10 years we'll see more and more of that. So it is fun to watch,
Yeah, and it's also fun to see new blood come up. Young people, boys and girls come up and doing stuff and trying stuff, and that's always pretty encouraging.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't have a CNC in my shop. I would love one. I'll show you guys what I've been working on in a little bit, but I'd love to have a CNC in my shop. I don't have one. I probably have the room for a small one, but I don't really need one because one of my wife's best friends, she has 3 CNCs. So, wow. And they're like, they might all be, if now I'm thinking about it, might all be laser CNCs, or, CNC lasers. But holy cow, like how awesome is that? And she just, her name's Taylor. Taylor makes all sorts of different things. So it's like, if I ever need something engraved.
I want to be friends with her.
I know, right? Like,
no kidding.
That's what happens when you're a young professional and have no kids. You have disposable income. So, but yeah. So I figured at this point, I don't know if Phil, John, and I have really ever talked about the magazine process or shared our magazine process with people that listen to this podcast. And I know usually we're talking about woodworking techniques or stuff like that, but I figured with you two here, it would be a good chance to talk about how our magazine process works. Because whenever we do tours at the magazine, people are always fascinated to see how we actually produce the magazine or how we produce a show or just in general. And let's just blanket this as a project. So if we're making a project, how does that work? How do we get that from a design in, let's say, Chris Fitch's head to something that gets printed on paper?
You start, Becky.
Erich?
Oh, I
or
start.
Becky?
No, I say Becky starts.
Becky starts.
Then I'll tell my part of it.
Well, back before COVID, we used to have lots of meetings to discuss.
Right.
But
humans talk to each other face to face. Crazy.
How
so
gross
basically,
was that?
if Chris was building it, then he would go ahead and knock it out, or else he would talk to one of our builders and figure out the process for making, let's say, a cabinet. Is that what they would talk about? What kind of joinery to use, and there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Well, there's 1,000 ways to make a rabbit. What's the process? And then after it gets completed, a editor then would sit down with the builder. They would discuss the process. The editor then comes up with an outline, gives it to a illustrator / graphic designer, and then they come up with a layout. Is this going to be a 6-page article or a 12-page article? Really depends on how creative we get with the design. From there, then the illustrator and the editor kind of go back and forth to pace it out, and the illustrator or art director then goes to photography with it and directs what they want it to look like. We prop it and stage it how someone would want to see it in their home. And then
question, I have a question quick. Are the photos actually taken in somebody's house?
Sometimes not. A lot of times
not.
Most of the time not. I mean, we do go on location quite a bit if it needs a large room, say like a really large dining room table, or I don't know, at the other end of that, we've built an entire bedroom in the studio. So that oak suite from 3-4 years ago, that was built in the studio. So after photography, it goes back and the designers and illustrators kind of flesh it out. And then it starts to route, which means it goes to everyone on staff. And we look through the numbers. We look through the words. We make sure everything makes sense as if you're looking at this for the very first time, because we do get caught up in
get
what
lost
we know.
Yeah.
Forest for the trees.
You get lost in what we already know and what somebody looking at it for the first time knows.
Yeah.
And
this is the point where
pages.
editors get their feelings hurt.
Yes.
Yeah,
Which
they can.
Maybe I'm not the sensitive one. Maybe I'm the one that likes to push the buttons, but that red pen, it gets pretty fun to use.
Yeah, it sure does.
Did I miss anything, Erich?
No, that's pretty good. That's pretty accurate. It's funny, back in the day, when it first started, these projects were built by, there was no shop guys. It was the editor and the illustrator built the project, and then they took notes as they went along. And the thought and the theory was at the time that that's the best way to really learn how to convey this information. Now, first, it would be interesting to try that now, but we'd have to have a shop that's probably 3 times bigger than it is, and it's big enough as it is already. And just the timelines, it's hard. And to me, the one thing I think that we all wrestle with is to what skill level are we focusing how we build and how we present it.
Sure.
Obviously we can't do a beginner because you can't tell everybody every issue. This is a table saw. This is a band. That kind of stuff. So, and the experts, the guys that really know what they're doing, that know all about ergonomics, basically what they want is the numbers and the material list.
Yeah.
They'll do a lot of it themselves. So we're kind of always hovering in entertaining an intermediate woodworker and keeping it interesting for them, and on occasion bringing some insights to maybe the expert or the. And it's always a help to a beginner, but you can only hold hands so far in the process, because you'd make one issue would be one project to do it so thoroughly that a beginner could understand it. So that's a big part of the meetings that Becky was mentioning, is trying to hone that, trying to find that kind of that sweet spot, that area where, okay, we're conveying what we need to convey here. And a lot of times, I know, Logan, this happened to us as editors, is you do get a blind spot. You completely forget, oh my gosh, we didn't talk about that thing at all.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's the ongoing struggle. And the more we do it, which we've all done it quite a bit, the more you see those little speed bumps or those ambushes up front. But and I think
you get so close to the project that you just completely overlook something so obvious. And that happens to everybody that has ever written a project for Woodsmith. You get so close to it that you spend weeks looking at the CAD drawings and the artwork, putting everything together, piecing it all together, and then it comes through the first routing phase, and you look at a note that somebody made, you're like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. How did I do that?
Well,
there's no way that drawer front can be 30 inches when the opening's only 22.
Right. Yeah. But that does happen to us all, and fairly frequently, and that's why we try to, we don't get to comb over it as much as we used to, but we do still hit it pretty hard especially on the numbers. My goal has always been to make sure the numbers are right, because that's I think that's the minimum that we should do for them, is make sure that.
Yeah. And it's so easy to miss a number that we
that's true.
Forget a dimension altogether, because for us it's obvious, but we're looking at it physically. We're not looking at it on paper.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and when you're not standing there with the boards in your hand at the table saw, a lot of times it's like, I did it for a living for a lot of years, and you easily step over something that you forget, it's like, and then you get that real panicky moment. It's like, oh crap, I forgot about that whole section, and then now I got to go talk to the illustrator or the editor, whichever one is found this thing.
Whichever hat you're wearing,
Exactly, and say, gee, we need to consider this, or we need to put this in.
Where does it fit?
Right. And sometimes it is a kind of a shoehorn thing in, but it usually, It usually works pretty good.
Sure.
And it's nice to have both, like Phil and Todd and people along the way to look at it with a fresh eye. Because a lot of times those guys see the stuff that we forget.
Yeah, it's the people that haven't seen the project yet that catch stuff, which is good. So I guess the one thing I was gonna extrapolate on what Becky said was more from a conceptual side. A lot of times, what we'll do for magazine projects is we'll have a list of basically a wish list of projects. Like, hey, these are projects we think would be really cool as a staff. So our designers, John, Chris, and Dylan, will have that list, and they'll kind of place them in the magazine, kind of spread them out so we don't have 3 dressers back to back, or we don't have 3 huge armoire type things back to back. And then they'll be working on those couple of issues ahead of us. And our issue, they take 8 weeks. So we have 8 weeks to produce an issue. So they'll be working ahead of us. And they'll be working on a design, and they do draw the design in basically a CAD program. It's called Inventor. It's like an AutoCAD program where they'll draw out each individual parts, and then they'll populate that into a 3D model. And then that's what you guys use, is that 3D model, right? And you guys will take that and use that 3D model to produce the flat 2D artwork, but the artwork in Illustrator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so you guys
shuffle the pieces.
Yep, so you guys aren't actually going in and having to draw a hand holding a board every time, or draw a rail in a style every time.
Yeah. Not every time, because, in general, the angle of view that we use is really similar. So we can take a set of hands that we've used and reuse them, because the elevation change on a hand, an organic thing, you don't notice it as much. So you can, we can stretch, we can do all sorts of fun stuff with hands. Yeah, there's been times I've felt pretty ornery, like, I want to try and put like 2 left hands in this picture and see if anybody notices it. But then I don't, because I think, they may if I'm lucky. Yeah. If I'm not, what my luck goes sometimes is like no one would notice it, and then I would forget it and forget to change it, and then all of a sudden we get it. Hey, how come this picture has 2 left hands?
Yeah.
Oh boy. So I don't ever tread that way.
Or one of my favorites is when I'm working with Becky on a project, and she'll get all her layout done, and she'll put blah 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 as the header, and that's literally all it will say is making the blah blah blah. And I'll completely forget to change it, and it will get routing, and somebody will circle it. Usually it's Phil, and he'll just go,
yeah.
Yep,
Phil's,
I forgot to put that in.
Yeah. I've seen Phil's several times myself.
I think we all have.
The 3D software has, it makes that leap. Then it goes to this other software program called Illustrator that we use to create what we see in the magazine. And it's pretty handy. Like I said, it's you can do all sorts of things in the 3D thing, and then sometimes you fudge it right in Illustrator, depending on how hard it is to do. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, so now John, Phil, and I usually do a small segment of what are you guys working on. So, Erich, do you have any? I know you just had a surgery, so I don't know if you've been in your shop much, or if you do much at your shop at home.
I do. What I'm trying to do is move more towards carving.
Okay.
And so one of the people I've been following is a gal named Mary May. Mm-hmm. She does a lot of cool carving stuff. And she just did something that I only noticed while I was convalescing from my surgery, was she did this kind of fish bowl. So I think I'm going to give that a try. Nice. It's all the years, like I said, I spent cutting sheet stock and big plywood projects and the cabinetry stuff. That stuff is kind of,
You're over it?
It doesn't thrill me as much as it used to. It's just a little thing. So my shop is becoming more like a carving thing, or I have a number of grandkids that love the scroll saw. So I've been able to work with them on some of that stuff, which is a lot of fun. Because that's a really great little tool for a kid, because you really can't hurt yourself with it. And it's not very intimidating. And you can create cool stuff. And so I've been doing some of that with them. And then actually also my art, the painting part of it. I've moved all my oil painting stuff out to my shop because it can be kind of stinky. in the house, and Tammy doesn't. My wife doesn't mind, but it's like, yeah, it's just kind of lingers. So I moved it all out there this last winter.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man, that was so my grandpa, every Sunday growing up, from the time I was earliest I can remember until I went to college, every Sunday, my mom, my brother, and I would go over to my grandma's for lunch. And my grandpa and I would sit there. We would watch a NASCAR race in the morning. I hate racing, but he loves racing. So we'd watch a NASCAR race in the morning, and then we'd watch Bob Ross. And my grandpa has a house full of wet paintings that he's done in the Bob Ross style, following him.
Nice.
And so I just remember walking into their house every Sunday, and it just smelled like oil paints. I mean, it was great. Loved it.
People pick on Bob Ross, but I'll tell you what, the guy's a stud. Because anybody that can paint, I'm gonna go art nerd for you on a minute here, for a few minutes. Anybody that can paint with a small palette of colors that have both phthalo blue and phthalo green, and do a complete painting in a half hour and it not be a nightmare is good.
In one take.
In one take, yeah.
In one take, and he is so soothing as he does it.
And that's a lot of his brand, is just enjoy this, have fun. There's no mistakes. This is a happy cloud, a happy tree.
I know. Love it. Yeah, actually, speaking of carving, I have some. This is I don't know if you guys can see that piece of wood leaning up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Erich,
yep, on the table.
We cut some basswood a couple of months ago on video. Becky was there for that video on the sawmill, and I got some basswood for you that I'm gonna have to bring you sometime for some carving. It's
wonderful.
still a little damp, but it's workable. That platter right above my head that's on its edge is a basswood one I turned a couple of days ago.
Does it dry fast or slow, or
it dries pretty quickly?
Know. Does it?
Yep, it dries. Yeah. Right now it's at about 24% moisture, and it will only cut. Wow, Becky, we did that video in October probably.
Yeah, before all the snow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's drying pretty quick. So I'll have to bring some of that to you.
Nice.
So
I will take it.
All right. Becky, I know you may not have any woodworking projects, but what are you working on magazine-wise? You got any sneak peeks for everybody? What's going to be coming up?
Actually, my project this issue is a bathroom storage cart. So, yeah, I could put up a little sneak picture of that.
A little teaser? That one is all written, by the way. I have written that.
Yeah, I know you're waiting on me.
I'm waiting on you now.
So there you have it, folks. There you have an editorial art interaction.
Yes,
live.
Exactly.
Just right there.
Well, to be fair, she's been in the studio the last 2 days filming a CNC session with Chris. So.
Yes. Yep.
So we got a bathroom cart. Our reader tips are ready. Got some nice reader tips in there.
Oh, and you guys did it good with that, because one of the circle jig.
Yeah.
Dirk told me yesterday that was in there, so it's like we don't have to do an online extra now for that.
Oh,
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Right?
Oh, you're welcome.
We just
It's all on
refer to
purpose.
page 6.
Yeah.
That's nice.
You can thank Mark for that. That came from his seminar he did 2 months ago, probably.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
That's a nice little jig.
Yeah, it works nice. So, cool.
And I'm going to do a plug for Dylan, because tomorrow you are not going to get your artwork either, because tomorrow I'm working with Dylan on his seminar.
Yeah, Dylan's seminar. So, for people that don't know, we host online seminars. They're basically, I don't want to call them interactive remote demos, but that's what everybody in the wood turning world's calling them, the IRDs. But they're seminars that basically one of our staff puts on every the third Thursday of every month.
Correct.
Different topics. It's basically roughly an hour long, kind of a live. You can ask us questions on whatever the topic is. Last one I did was hand-cut dovetails. Dylan's tomorrow is what, Becky?
Dowels, tenons, like loose tenons, dominoes.
Yes, dominoes. There you go.
Oh, is it strictly
Biscuits.
dominoes,
Biscuits.
or is it just...
Biscuits. That's what it is.
Biscuits, dominoes, and dowels.
Ah.
So how to use them, what the benefit is of each. So that'll be fun. So
it's one of my moments of shame. I bought a Porter cable, that 257 or whatever it was, biscuit joiner, and I never used it once. And I sold it at a garage sale.
Oh man, I have my Makita is sitting underneath my feet right now. I don't use it all the time, but I use it for aligning big top glue ups.
Yeah.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Love it.
Yeah. It's Norm Abrams was big on the biscuit joiner, man. Back if you watch some of the New Yankee
Sure.
Workshop, I bet you that guy sold 1 million biscuit joiners for Porter Cable.
He single-handedly made the biscuit joiner market.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he did. And it was true, and they worked great. For whatever reason, though, I don't know. I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah. So, all right. Oh, and if people do want to sign up for that seminar, woodsmithshop.com/seminars. However, this airs Friday, the day after his
I
seminar.
know, but you can always watch it after. So
You can always watch it after. Great point. So, so the last couple issues or episodes, whatever we're doing right now. We're doing an episode. So a couple episodes ago, well, let's step back. Phil and I, since you two probably don't listen to our podcast very often because you don't want to hear us talk any more than you have to in person, Phil and I we kind of made like a blood pact. Like it was like a spit shake when you used to do that. That we were going to finish some projects that we had started maybe a couple years ago, and we never finished. So I finished some nightstands. Phil finished a handful of things. A radio cabinet was one of them. And when we finished those, we said, oh, hey, this was fun. Let's do another project. So I have some built-ins in my wife's office that there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 cabinet cases that either have doors or drawers in them. That I said, you know what? They've been in there for 2 years, and I've never built the doors or the drawers for them. And I said I was going to build them. I have not. My deadline is in 3 days. I'm not going to get it done. Completely, I'm missing that.
remind me though,
Because I had, what's that?
did you not already have cabinets in your office?
No, I built the cabinets 2 years ago.
Yeah, but then you took them down.
I built the cabinets 2 years ago when she started working from home to make a built-in desk. I never made the drawers and the doors. So that was my whole thing, was I was going to finish those drawers.
So right
and
now
the
it's just a
doors.
shelf, basically, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, there's just open
A
shelves.
box
There's a
or
lot
some
of
sort.
storage in there,
Right.
as long as you don't mind looking at it. But I'm not going to give them done. I did order the stock, so I picked up some soft maple from Liberty Hardwood and some plywood. So I made progress. I ordered the stock. I'm not going to get them done in time, though. I fully am aware of this. But what I started doing was I started to make good on a promise I made this summer. So we had that derecho come through, right? Took a ton of trees down. I spent a boatload of time in Cedar Rapids doing tree removals and milling for people. And one of my buddies that I milled a tree for, I milled the tree for myself. It was in his backyard. He messaged me and asked me if I wanted it, and it was a very nice curly maple tree. It's a soft maple, but it was all curly. So I milled him up, took him home, and my agreement with him was I'd make him a couple of turkey calls out of these curly maple boards. So the last couple of days and weekends, I have been spending some time turning these little turkey calls. And they are
Cool.
nice little curly maple. That's one of them. This was my test one. It had some weird wormholes. I don't know if you can see that on that sound hole. It looks like it's torn out. It's actually not. It's a wormhole. But I stabilized them in some green epoxy to stabilize them, some green cactus juice. So they're really nice and curly. It sounds great. Sounds like a turkey. Couldn't be more happy with it. I have
The ones I see in Hy-Vee never make a sound.
Oh, they don't. Oh, I've been doing this wrong then.
I've never heard him make a sound. I'm impressed. I must not be paying attention.
Yeah, you're obviously not paying attention.
Hy-Vee is a grocery store.
Yes, Hy-Vee is a grocery store for all you
sorry.
non-Midwesterners.
Right.
So the next. So I told him. I told Jim that I would make him 3 of them. One for him, one for his son, and then one for his brother, who happened to be my neighbor growing up. And so I'm working on number 2. That first one was kind of my test piece to see how everything works, because there's a lot that goes into these. Like, these are basically a musical instrument, right? There's soundboards in them. There's everything. So this is my second one. So that's the bottom of it.
You're kind of cool looking.
Yeah, I have currently turned, and I've turned the inside. There's a glass soundboard in there right now. So that soundboard just got glued in about an hour before we started recording. So once that's done gluing in, I will take my piece of slate and glue that on the top. We'll see how this one sounds. But God, holy cow. I messaged Jim right before we started recording and said, dude, these are so fun. Like, I'm ordering more material. I ordered way more than I needed anyways. I'm going to order more because these are an absolute blast to turn. You know, I'm going to make myself one, because what's better than turning the lathe on and making a turkey call, shooting a turkey with a turkey call that you made. So I know Becky doesn't like my hunting, but you know, I think it'll be fun.
You can talk to turkeys all you want.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen Tom strutting in my backyard the last couple of weeks. So I went out to test this one early this morning. I had no takers, so maybe they just didn't like the sound. So, but yeah, so that's kind of what I've been working on. I have a couple of those Matt Cremona chair kits that I need to bring into the studio to get some photos done. So yeah, it's been a fun couple days, waiting on artists to get my artwork done so I can keep going on my magazine stuff.
Stinking artists.
All right, so there you guys have it. That was another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. Thank you guys for listening.
One question.
Yes.
We do comments here, right? People put in comments and say whatever.
They can email us.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So if anybody, wait a minute here. I'm gonna do one more plug for a fossil here.
Okay.
So if anybody's interested, or has questions about the house that you live in, send them in. And if we get enough of them, maybe I'll do a podcast where I can answer questions. I spent a lot of time, a lot of years working on houses. Basically in the upper Midwest. There's some differences around the country, but I have access to people and buddies in the building industry that if you live in Atlanta, you don't build the way you do in Denver. So a lot of guys out there know that. But so if you have questions about your house and you're interested, drop a line or drop an email to Lage at AIM Media if you want to. And
so what I will do is I will put Erich's email in the show notes page on our website, so you guys can send me an email if you do have questions about your house. Erich's been talking a long time about getting a podcast going, so I would love for you guys to send in your questions so Erich can get that rolling, and then he can have me as a guest on.
That's right. I can have these guys on.
So, and just a reminder to make sure you guys go wherever you listen to these podcasts, give us a 5-star rating, leave comments if you have them, send us questions in. If you guys are watching this on YouTube and seeing our ugly mugs, leave a comment there and we will try to answer as many as we can. And until next time, thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you again next week. Bye! Today's episode is brought to you by Shaper Tools, the makers of the Shaper Origin. It's the handheld CNC router that brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. Take advantage of Shaper's spring deal where you can save $150 in added accessories by March 28th. Visit shapertools.com to learn more about how you can upgrade your workshop with the Shaper Origin.